Hello and welcome back to another Walking Dead video, and today we'll be talking about the worst episode from each season. If you want to see what my favourite episode from each season is, make sure to go click on the icon on the top right for the best episode for each season. I recommend you watch it either before this video or after. So let's jump into season 1, and I would have to say it is episode 6. It was a really hard one to choose because season 1 is so short, there are really no filler episodes. Every single episode is absolutely fantastic, but I feel like episode 6 is the weakest of the first season, and that's mostly because how small scale it is and how nothing really happens. It all takes place underground, where the other episodes, they take place in Atlanta. Season 2's has to be episode 6, and this episode had a lot of potential, but it's really an hour of you just liking Lori, being very boring, and nothing really happening. This episode has Lori going to Shane and Rick, find out she's pregnant, deciding what to do with it, sending Glenn off to go get pills, and he ends up hooking up with Maggie. It's a very boring episode, and by the end of it, you very much dislike Lori, even though you're not meant to. You don't really like her in this episode because of how she's treating Shane and Rick. The worst episode of season 3 has to be episode 16. This episode is very underwhelming and is very disappointing with all the setup from the 15 previous episodes. This episode has the governor attack the prison, fail, run away and kill all his men. Andrea dies for some stupid reason because she spends half the time talking to the guy dying instead of trying to escape. And if you find out why this episode is so underwhelming, it makes it even worse. This entire episode is happened because of budget issues. They had a whole plan of Andrea actually surviving and saving Woodbury, but because they ran out of budget by the end of season 3, they scrapped that and we got this episode instead. Season 4 has to be episode 12, and this is when The Walking Dead stood still. This episode is about Beth and Daryl and them just kind of surviving after the aftermath of the prison battle. It is very boring, and this episode is the first true bottle episode where nothing happens and it's entirely skippable. All you need to know is that Beth and Daryl bonded a little and Beth was taken away, and it sets up Daryl with the claimers. It is a very boring episode, and because it only focuses on Beth and Daryl, it is all up to Norman Reedus to carry this episode because Beth isn't that compelling at this point in time. This is easily a plot B or C that was stretched out to be an entire episode. The worst episode for me in season 5 has to be episode 4, and this is the episode that entirely focuses on Beth. She can't carry the episode, and it is really annoying. It has a cool location with it being inside of Atlanta. However, just to focus on Beth really brings down this episode because she cannot carry it. We learn a bit about these supposed villains, but they aren't that villainous, other than a couple here and there. But the main villain, Dawn, is not a very interesting character. This definitely should have been a plot B, and we should have definitely seen maybe Rick and group heading towards Atlanta as a second plot because Beth couldn't carry this entire episode by herself. Moving on to season 6, and this is another season where I couldn't really pick a worst episode, but I settled on episode 13, and this is the episode where Carol and Maggie are captured by the remaining saviors and they're trying to escape. This episode definitely feels like a filler and them trying to get to 16 episodes. Nothing really happens in this episode, and you can really skip the episode as it doesn't really develop Carol's character any further. You can skip it and you can still understand why Carol runs away in the next episodes because they set it up in the previous episodes. There's no big story moments in this episode. It is just an episode where Carol kills some people one last time and where we get the we killed all the saviors moment for them to then realise no, they haven't. This episode could just easily be skipped. Season 7's has to be episode 6, and this is the episode where Tara meets Oceanside and Heath disappears. And this episode is yet another bottle episode surrounded by more bottle episodes. And what I think the worst bit about this episode is that Tara cannot carry the episode. We have a character we don't really care about, introducing us to more characters we don't really care about. She's a good side character, but not a good protagonist for an episode. The pace in this episode is really slow, it drags its heels, and this is definitely meant to be a plot C or B, not an entire episode's worth of story. For season 8, it has to be episode 9, and this is the episode where they kill off Carl. It does have some entertaining bits with Morgan and Carol over at the Kingdom, but this episode is really slow, drawing out Carl's death. He was bitten all the way back in one of the first episodes of the season, about episode 4, and we find out he was dying in episode 8. He then drags his death on until the end of episode 9, and this episode is just Carl being dragged around Alexandria by Rick and Michonne. It's a very slow episode. It is emotional kinda, but it is just very dumb that they killed off Carl. He should have never died, and that easily makes this the worst episode in Season 8. Season 9's has to be Episode 16, and this is solely because Episode 16 is completely pointless. This episode feels like they're trying to meet the quota of 16 episodes, because Episode 15 feels like a perfect season finale. This episode tells the same story as Episode 1 of Season 10, and that is that they cross over into Whisperland to do something, and that starts a war. Why do we need to see it twice for Alpha to start a war? This episode is just repetition of story, and it is very much useless. You can skip this episode and still understand. The only thing that you could miss out is the fall of the kingdom. This episode does have some good things, but it's definitely the worst episode out of a very, very strong season. Season 10's is easy. It has to be Episode 20. I really dislike this episode solely because we have a brand new character which we do not know be the sole character of this episode, really. And this entire episode takes place within a train box. It is very boring, and it is 45 minutes of a girl with a splinter in her finger and hallucinating. There are no entertaining moments in this episode. I know a lot of people really dislike episode 21. However, I feel like there is some use to that episode, unlike this episode, where it could have been skipped altogether, or maybe 2 to 3 minutes at the start of the episode where we see them head to the Commonwealth for the first time in Season 11. Now, for Season 11, for me, is Episode 8. I know a lot of people really do not like Episode 12, but for me, Episode 8 is the worst episode. And that is because it is just build-up on top of build-up. Episode 7 is a lot of build-up towards this big fight between Maggie and the Reapers. Then Episode 8 is more build-up for it all to go down in Episode 9. Episode 9 is a fantastic episode. However, because Episode 9 has all the actual story and everything important, Episode 8 is very weak, and it doesn't help that the main villain of the arc gets killed by his own people, and the only character to meet the main villain is Daryl. This is a very worthless episode, a very badly paced episode, and it's a very infuriating episode because of the terrible decisions that are made in the writing room for this episode. And that is my list for the worst episodes from each season of The Walking Dead. So please tell me down below, do you agree with my opinion, or do you have a different opinion? I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions on anything Walking Dead down below. But this is it for me today, so make sure to like and subscribe to help out the channel to get up to date with all things Walking Dead. So goodbye, peace out, and I'll talk to you in my next video.